We are heading towards a hostile takeover of the sport of college football. A recent article by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports mentions that the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for further expansion of the college football playoff from 12 teams to 14 or even 16 teams. But this is less about adding 2 to 4 new teams to the playoff. This is about changing the fundamental design of this playoff and getting more control for these two conferences. Now, control and power has been growing for the Big Ten and SEC for a few years now, with the real spark happening when Texas and Oklahoma approached the SEC and wanted to join. We later found out that ESPN was the real mover here, where they basically tried to destabilize the Big 12 so that other conferences would pick off the other Big 12 schools, allowing the real prize, OU and Texas, to leave and join the SEC without having to pay a buyout. Now, this didn't work exactly like ESPN hoped, but they did empower another conference to make moves as well, as the Big Ten made their move shortly after to scoop up one of the biggest TV markets in the country, inviting USC and UCLA. Now, this move did destabilize the Pac-12 enough to where they could not lock down a favorable media rights deal, and it led to all but 2 members leaving for greener pastures, destroying the historic conference just like that. But we need to talk about the real players behind this. It's not the SEC and the Big Ten, it's the media companies backing them. The SEC is now fully backed by ESPN, and the Big Ten is backed mostly by Fox. And while it seems like conference expansion may have been stalled for now, they both decided that it's time to go after the big moneymaker, the college football playoff. In the Yahoo Sports article, this expansion seems to be fully controlled by the SEC and Big Ten, with these two conferences seem to be the major beneficiaries of this expansion, pushing for 4 auto bids for both conferences, while giving 2 bids to both the Big 12 and ACC, and then 1 spot for the G5, and then maybe saving a spot for Notre Dame. So this model would basically defang the College Football Playoff Committee since they no longer have 5 bids, there are now 13 auto bids. Now, in my opinion, the College Football Playoff Committee sucks, so I'm not completely against this, but also it takes away from the selection process. The main reason they want the auto bids is this would guarantee big payouts from the College Football Playoff. And to justify this, the super conferences mentioned that they don't just want teams to be punished for losing to good teams in their conference, which could finally push for the SEC to add a 9th conference game. This clearly feels like a reaction from the SEC, since they felt that 2 or even 3 teams were snubbed from the 12-team playoff. Teams like Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, although having 3 losses, felt like they deserved a spot over teams like Clemson, SMU, Arizona State, Boise State, etc., due to have played a tough quote-unquote SEC schedule. Especially since the Big Ten ended up getting 4 teams in this playoff over the SEC's 3 teams, they wanted to force this kind of equality between the two conferences. But that's where the equality ends. In this format, by default, at least 50% of the field would be from these two conferences if we go to a 16-team model, and if we go to 14 teams, it will be well over 50%. And if this were to go into effect, it would officially confirm that the Big Ten and SEC were more valuable conferences and would effectively devalue the ACC and Big 12, which would lead to the Power 2 getting stronger and the rest of college football getting weaker. This is where the hostile takeover comes in. The fact is that the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for more control. They want to control the sport completely. In the past, they had to listen to these conferences like the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the Group of 5. They had to listen to these conferences and make concessions to them. Now they just want total control. And it seems like with this model, that's what they're trying to do. Now, if this does go through, I can see this be a test run to see if the Big Ten and SEC should just break away from the rest of the FBS level of college football, similar to how there was a split in 1978, which created the FBS and FCS level of Division I. Overall, this consolidation of power is going to hurt the schools who are not in these 2 super conferences. Teams will recruit against those who aren't in the Big Ten or SEC. There will probably be better revenue sharing for the athletes as well. What I think would happen is that the top teams from the ACC and Big 12 will eventually join one of these 2 super conferences, and then they break off to create their own league. Now, overall, I'm not a huge fan of this. I don't want it to just become the NFL model, because it seems like the Big 10 and the SEC are just pushing to be the NFC and the AFC, and I don't want that. I do like how college football, you have 130 teams, and yeah, only 20 are actually realistically gonna compete for a national title, but it's, all these teams feel like they could at least do something. They have a chance, but This model basically would just confirm that no, that's not the case at all. Like teams like Boise State, they technically were in the spot where they could make a push for a national title, but obviously they didn't because they lost their game. Some things I'm intrigued to see is how would they decide which 4 teams from these 2 conferences get in? Is it just going to be the top 4 teams based on the rankings or the seeding? I think that would be really stupid, and I think it would just take away from just the potential here. Because I think if you're going to do 4 teams guaranteed, you could easily do like a play-in game, which was mentioned in the article, or do like a conference tournament where, you know, the last, you know, for the final seed, you have 3 teams playing for it, or something like that. I do think there's a lot of potential here, and I think it would be entertaining. I would watch it. Imagine, especially if there's a team that gets really hot towards the end of the season, a team like Florida, during the end of the season, they beat LSU, they beat Ole Miss. These were teams that were, you know, fighting for a playoff spot. So if they got hot towards the end of the year, they could potentially like get into that play-in game where they can get that final spot and then maybe go on a run to the playoff. I don't think they would have gone far, but I think it would have been really cool, and it would have given a lot of hype and give hope to teams that get hot towards the middle or the end of the year. Like teams like South Carolina, I think that was the team that got the most hot towards the end of the year, where, you know, at the beginning of the year they lost a few games, but then they really turned it up. And then that would have been a team that really could have maybe made a run if they got into that final 4th spot or something. So I do think that would be pretty cool. And I also think another thing they could implement is potentially a relegation and promotion model if they did do this split, because I do think we're heading toward this direction. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be a split between the top dogs and then the lower, you know, FBS schools. It just feels like it's growing more and more. I do think the transfer portal is a better way of distributing the talent, but it seems like the good players are still going to the good schools, and, you know, the G5 schools are just getting the bust 5 stars, and, you know, maybe they'll play good there, but it's still, you know, they're still not the same level of school. Like, I don't think it's ever going to happen. Like, I don't think a team like an App State is ever going to reach to the same level as like an Ohio State. Like, I don't think it's ever going to happen. But if we implement something like a promotion and relegation, it can allow teams that are doing really well in the lower levels get promoted to the upper league and actually get a chance to compete for this big title or the overall national championship. And then the teams that aren't performing well will get relegated. I do think there's going to end up being a lot of fat that's cut from these big conferences. Like, I do think the teams that are just grandfathered in the Big Ten and SEC are probably going to get either sent down or cut from the conference, the schools that aren't generating the money to, you know, justify them being there. That's my personal opinion. I don't think that was what they should do, because I do like the, you know, historical conferences, but at this point, historical conferences don't really exist anymore because they just keep expanding. So we'll see how that goes. But I do think a promotion relegation structure could be interesting, and I actually would like it. And if they put it in a college football game, that would be pretty cool as well. But we're still a few years away from this, but we could figure out, you know, some of these details in the next few months, especially the first domino being the expansion of the playoff and auto bids. Like, that would be the first domino that would fall, that would basically confirm that this is happening. Like, if this happens where the SEC and Big Ten really put their foot down and say, no, we're getting 4 spots guaranteed. That's how it is. We're going to be, you know, majority of the playoff. That's how it's going to go. And if you don't want to play, then we'll just do our own thing. Like, I really think that they're tired of listening to these other conferences at this point. But in the end, this is just my thoughts. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you like these kind of videos. I do really like, you know, looking at these kind of reports and articles and giving my own spin on it. I will put a link in the description to the whole article as well. I referenced it, you know, quite a bit, so be sure to read it. There's still a lot of really cool information in that article, so I definitely think you should go read it. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't cover, just so you guys can go read the whole thing, because I don't want to just read the article. Basically, I just kind of want to get my own spin on it. But yeah, be sure to leave a like if you like this video, leave a dislike if you don't like it. Make sure you subscribe. I appreciate it if you subscribe. If not, that's fine. And then YouTube thinks you're going to like this video on screen, so check it out. But other than that, this has been Jagnal, and I'll see you guys next time.